Welcome everybody back into NerdSesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are going to be previewing both conference final series. I cannot wait for both of these matchups, and we're going to start, Logan, with the one that is getting started first, that being Thunder Timberwolves. This was a very interesting regular season matchup. These teams split the regular season series 2-2. Always need to add some context to any regular season numbers. Chet misses 2 of those games. Julius Randle only plays in 1 of those games, so we haven't necessarily gotten a ton of looks at the full scope of this matchup. But the first thing that stands out to me, Logan, when I think about this series is how the Minnesota Timberwolves, in particular their stars, are going to perform against a Thunder defense that was historic this regular season, that currently has the biggest gap between it and the number 2 playoff defense that we have seen since 1971. How do you expect Anthony Edwards in particular to perform in this matchup?
That really is the first big key to me in this series, Carson, and specifically when we're looking at the key to winning this for both sides, the Wolves and the Thunder. I think it comes down to which defensive unit can more reliably make the others more uncomfortable. And Ant did play in all 4 games against Oklahoma City in the regular season. He gave them 22, 9, and 6 on just 54.7% true shooting, and a lot of that is bolstered by how much he got to the line. He only shot 36% from the field and 31% from deep. And the reason that I think it's really important to focus on Ant is because I think for the Wolves to win this series, Anthony Edwards has got to be the best player in this series. And I'm just not super confident that that's going to happen. Really, there's not a defensive matchup that I think is food for Ant. Ant is really special because he's super, super explosive and can just blow by guys on ball and can get to the rim at will, but he can also just get torrentially hot and just rain down threes from behind the arc. And I think the OKC defense can make shots tougher for Ant more than any other team because they have so many elite defenders. Again, I don't think there's a matchup that is really super favorable for Ant. J-Dub, an all-NBA caliber defender, I think can really hold his own one-on-one, is not going to give up anything. I don't think he can abuse Chet Holmgren on switches. I think with that 7'6" wingspan, he can do a really good job of getting out to the perimeter and contesting those shots. Alex Caruso, I don't think it's going to be easy. Lou Dort, there's just, Kason Wallace. There's a lot of guys that Oklahoma City can throw on to Ant, and I don't think Ant has a really great advantage against all of them, more so because Oklahoma City does a great job collectively as a team of cutting off driving lanes and cutting off the basket. They also have 2 really high-impact rim protectors. And so I think Oklahoma City, Carson, is going to do a really good job in this series of making Ant a jump shooter. And when I say that, some people may say, well, isn't that also good for Minnesota? Ant was a historically great three-point shooter this regular season. He was. I regurgitated this stat throughout the regular season. Only 3 other players have shot 39.5%. It was 40 for most of the year. Unfortunately, he came down that 0.5% to make the stat a little less
Stat
cool.
lost some aura, sadly.
Just a little bit, but it's still Ant. And the names are still the same on 10 threes a game. It's Curry, it's Clay, and it's Damian Lillard, but I think that's the correct way to play Anthony Edwards. I think Oklahoma City has the personnel to do that. These are guys that apply tremendous ball pressure. They're going to get up in Ant's dribble. They're going to pack the paint. They're going to get into driving lanes. They're going to work together as a team. And I just think this is the best defense in the league. Dude, you mentioned that stat at the top. That's ridiculous, Carson. This is a historically great defense, and we've been talking about this all regular season, and some people have tried to downplay that fact, but I think that's where Oklahoma City really hangs their hat, and that is their secret weapon. That is their key advantage in this series, and I think they can make life harder on Anthony Edwards than anybody else can.
I don't know how much of a secret weapon it is, but I do still think it's underappreciated that we are literally looking at one of the greatest defenses of all time. You look at what they did to Jokic in that Denver offense. We have never seen anybody slow them down at a level comparable to that over a 7-game series. They dominate teams, and it all starts on the defensive end. So I do think that this is by far the toughest matchup that Ant has faced in these playoffs, and it's just by far the toughest matchup that he could face, because it's not just easily the best defense in basketball. This is the one team that actually has multiple dudes who have a good chance to stay in front of Ant nobody on the Lakers could stay in front of him on an island. The Warriors did a better job, but still it was not nearly at the level of the perimeter defense you're getting from Lou Dort, from Alex Caruso, Cason Wallace, J-Dub, all those guys. But I expect Dort and Caruso to be the primary Ant defenders. And it's not just that those guys are such great screen navigators. It's not just that those guys move their feet so well, that they have that quickness on ball. It's also the strength and it's the physicality. But Ant's special because he's not just lightning quick downhill, he's also exceptionally strong for having that kind of speed. These are two dudes who can counter him quite well on both of those fronts, especially with the strength, and we know they are going to lean into playoff physicality. And then, as you said, this is also the defense with by far the best rim protection in basketball. They're holding teams comfortably to the worst field goal percentage inside of 6 feet of any defense in these playoffs. So they can just defend him straight up much better than anyone else can, because the Lakers had to get very gimmicky with their defense. This is a team that has elite point of attack personnel, and they have elite back line personnel, where you think it's going to be difficult for Ant to get past their perimeter defense consistently. And when he does, he is driving into the most difficult paint to finish in all of basketball. I still think, though, we're going to see some varied coverages, and I do think we'll see some aggressive looks from OKC. Like, for the most part, when he's running pick and roll, I expect them to bring two up to the level and dare him to make reads and dare him to make passes over all of OKC's length and ball pressure. We might see some switching because the OKC bigs are that mobile, but I still think that Ant would be more comfortable working one-on-one against a Chet or a Hartenstein than he will be trying to deal with, again, that sort of pressure with two on the ball. And then even if he gets out of that and he makes a solid pass, now you have an OKC defense that is way better in a scramble than anybody else, that is so fast, that is so great at playing in rotation. And I still think they could disrupt some of those Minnesota shooters, run a Mike Conley off the line, challenge a Jaden McDaniels more, attacking closeouts. That's a real superpower that they have, that collective speed defensively. I also think we'll probably see them mix in a little zone. I think they'll pick their spots with it, but again, just so Ant can't really get comfortable seeing the same coverage over and over again, test him as a decision maker in a different way, keep those bigs parked in the paint so they are fully locked in as rim protectors and they're in that role at all times. I just think they'll throw a lot at him. I think he'll see multiple primary defenders. I think he'll see different coverages. I think they'll do whatever they can to keep him from building an offensive rhythm. And as you said, this regular season was a struggle for him as a scorer against OKC. So if I do look at the couple keys for him, I agree. It's the outside shooting, because it's going to be hard for him to drive and finish in this matchup. He's already shooting under 55% in the restricted area in these playoffs. We've talked about some of his issues finishing at the rim. The degree of difficulty there skyrockets in this matchup because of the level of rim protection he's going up against. And then the playmaking is the other real key to me. That's been a key throughout this series. Overall, he's done a pretty good job, but he has to consistently make the right decisions when he does see these aggressive coverages. Ant's playing at a really high level. I think that this is a totally different level of a challenge than anything that he's seen in the playoffs, period. I think this is a different level than the Dallas defense that he saw last year that was really good and that gave him trouble. Like, I expect Ant to struggle a fair bit in this series relative to his standard.
I think that's a good way to put it. I think this is the toughest playoff defense that he's played in his entire NBA career. I think this is the toughest challenge of his young NBA career so far. And the only thing I wanted to add on top of that was that I think that I agree with you. Oklahoma City can defend Ant better one-on-one too, but because of some of the potential spacing limitations with some of the lineups, if you have a Gobert in there too, OKC also isn't incentivized to like move guys out of the paint where they're not going to be punished as much for packing the paint in those lineups as well, too, where you can bring another help side defender over there, too, to take that side of the rim away. It's just nothing's going to come easy for Ant in this series, and that's huge to me with Oklahoma City. And I don't feel that way. I don't want to take anything away from this Minnesota defense. I think they're great, but I don't feel that way about SGA against this Minnesota defense.
Before we get into that, I do want to ask a few more questions about the Minnesota offense going up against OKC defense.
I've still got a few more keys there, too.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, Logan. Let's talk about Julius Randle. This has been the redemption arc of all redemption arcs for him. He's been excellent in these playoffs. I would say he's been their most consistent player game to game and has been their most impressive performer relative to expectations. How do you think he fares in this series?
I'm not super confident that it's going to be a great Julius Randle series either. Now, I've already been burnt in these playoffs. Thank you, Julius. I like being proven wrong sometimes, man. Especially when guys just ball out. Julius Randle's been excellent in these playoffs as a decision maker, as a scorer, and I was completely wrong. I doubted Julius, but I really think this is a feast or famine series for him. Now, he only plays one game in the regular season against Oklahoma City. Wasn't great. I don't think it's too important to delve into the specifics of that. But when I look at the matchups he's going to be facing too, because this is an Oklahoma City team that, like you mentioned, Carson, can switch everybody. So it's not going to be like one primary defender for Julius. You're going to be matched up against basically everybody on this roster. And I don't see anything easy for Julius either. If it's Jalen Williams, if it's Alex Caruso, if it's Lou Dort, the only thing that I do see that Julius could do potentially is physically overpower these guys, but they're all also really, really strong. They're all NBA caliber defenders. They have elite instincts, but most importantly, they can all apply ball pressure and get up into Julius Randle's dribble. And that's the area where I'm really, really worried about Julius. And that's why I specifically say feast or famine, because there is a world where I could see Julius playing bully ball with some mismatches. If it's a Kason, if it's a slider guy that he gets switched on, right, maybe Isaiah Joe or something like that, I could see Julius bullying certain matchups that are on the floor. But I could also see these guys wreaking havoc on Julius's dribble, speeding him up, and forcing him into some really bad tendencies where maybe we see him slip into some of that old Julius Randle, where he's coughing the ball up uncharacteristically. He's settling for really bad shots. So I am worried about Julius, Carson. I think that this could be a really, really difficult series for him in terms of getting easy things. I would like to see Julius make good decisions. That's what I really want him to see, is when he has those difficult assignments, kicking it back out, screening, moving. I don't want Julius to do too much in this series.
It's a really difficult matchup. This OKC defense is just that special. Like you said, in the one game that Randle played against them, he didn't fare very well. He had 11, 6 and 6, 4 turnovers, 46% true shooting. Don't want to react too much to that sample, but we did get a look at how OKC was mostly willing to play him, and they were willing to play him primarily in single coverage off post-ups. I think that that speaks to the level of confidence that they have in a number of their defenders, and I do think that Randle is also going to see multiple different looks in multiple different matchups in this series. I do think that Hartenstein will start on him because OKC has consistently gone with that double big starting five. I do think that Hartenstein is just one of their 5 best players, and so he should be out there to start these games, and you want to have a counter for Minnesota's size and physicality in the front court, and I think that Hartenstein will actually guard Randle really well. I think that he is an excellent strength counter. I think that he can move his feet out in space well enough, but then, obviously, Hartenstein is only going to play maybe 25, 28 minutes per game in this series, so you're going to get lots of minutes where it is the wings who are matching up with Julius Randle. And then I would really love to see Caruso take on that matchup a good bit because I think he is just such a hound. I think that he is so strong. And I think if you look at what he was able to do with Jokic, fronting him, jostling for post position, his ability to guard larger players out of the post is really pretty exceptional. His hands are so ridiculously good. So I think that he could give Randle some trouble. I also think that Jalen Williams, as you mentioned, J-Dub, could have some good possessions. I also think maybe we see a little bit of J. Will. We obviously saw him deal with the Jokic matchup where sometimes they would go J. Will at the 5, but oftentimes it was J. Will as that primary post defender on Jokic to have a big physical strength counter for him. And then you have Chet as the backline defender. I do think that Chet is going to be on Gobert this entire series. I just think, obviously, you don't want him dealing with Randle because Randle has so much strength, and I think that you want your best rim protector as your backline defender the entire time, and Chet can be most effective and active as a helper when he is matched up with Gobert. So I do think that Randle will have his opportunities, as you said, where he's getting single coverage, and he has a strength advantage. I just think OKC has shown that they have plenty of ways to counter some of those size and strength advantages with how they've defended some of these big physical front court guys also, with their feist, with their hands.
Exactly. I think that if Randle gets one of those mismatches in the post too, OKC's defense is so good at rotating and reacting that I don't think he's going to be able to abuse that mismatch in single coverage long. I think this team would collapse on Randall and try to force the ball out. Like, they're just.
Well,
They're
they were
great
willing to let him play one-on-one in the first matchup, but I don't disagree. Like,
I'm saying
if he
killing him,
is
that's
really
the
getting
counter.
to his spots,
Exactly.
100%, there is not a better team at doubling and recovering and forcing turnovers when they do bring multiple defenders onto a post-up or into the action, onto the ball in any way. They're just so disruptive and they're so destructive. So I definitely think this is going to be a tough series for Julius Randle. That level of physicality, that level of activity, that many really good one-on-one defenders. But then if he is more comfortable as a one-on-one scorer, that's when I think they start bringing the doubles consistently. And I think that sort of pressure can speed him up a bit. I think you're absolutely right with the ball pressure. Julius Randle isolating against these perimeter defenders, if we're talking about him starting from the perimeter, is not good news. When he's trying to go at mismatches, it should absolutely be out of the post. And even then, man, it's hard as hell to get these guys the ball. Like, look at how hard it was for Jokic to get the ball when OKC was guarding him with these wings, especially Caruso. So he's been balling. Like, I'm not expecting a Julius Randle meltdown or anything. He's been playing at a really high level. I just think this is a super hard matchup, and I think his efficiency is going to take a considerable dip. I would expect to see some more turnovers. This is just what OKC does to everybody, man, and I really think it is, like, top to bottom. This series is going to be harder for everybody on Minnesota offensively. I think it's going to be harder for Jaden McDaniels, who has had a really good postseason offensively. He's averaging 15.5 points on 63% true shooting, but this is a team that can really pressure him out on the perimeter, that has crazy active hands. They're really going to test his handle, his comfort against that sort of ball pressure. They're going to bring real physicality. He's been very impressive as an inside the arc scorer. They're going to make life super hard on him. So I just think the Minnesota offense is going to struggle. And they do have a couple of advantages. Strength is the biggest one, right? With a guy like Julius Randle, with a guy as strong as Anthony Edwards coming downhill, with their overall size. OKC obviously is going to go double big for a fair bit of this series. I think that they've shown that they're a really good rebounding team when they have Hartenstein and Chet both out there together. And also their wings and guards are just so active on the glass that they'll fare pretty well there. But Minnesota's also a really good rebounding team. They have a Rudy Gobert on the floor. And Minnesota's also a really good shooting team. Like, they have consistently been one of the best three-point shooting teams in basketball. Maybe I shouldn't say consistently. They had a pretty brutal lull.
They were number playoffs. 4 in the regular season, but the thing to me is that Oklahoma City was the best at defending the three-point line. They were the number one defense against team shot the worst from deep against Oklahoma City. So I completely agree with you. I just don't think anything's going to be easy, man. I think that Oklahoma City has earned this reputation, and like I feel the same way. I think Minnesota is going to serve some of it back to OKC, but I definitely think it's more dramatic with Minnesota.
Yeah. It's just an unrivaled combination of perimeter pressure, perimeter speed with elite interior defense that the Thunder are bringing. Special versatility, special depth, special competitive fire. I think they turn Minnesota over a lot in this series because they turn everybody over a lot. I mentioned this stat last show. They're averaging the most steals per game that we've seen by a team in the playoffs to go at least 10 games deep since the 1970s, man. I mean, they're just doing stuff that we haven't seen defensively, in some cases, ever before, and in a lot of cases, in a long time. They just held Denver to a 103.9 offensive rating, man. The Denver Nuggets,
That's
one of the most reliably great
series,
offenses.
To be clear, right?
It's across the entire series. That's over a 7-game series. They made their offense produce like the Washington Wizards this regular season. This defense is just different. They make life hell on everyone, and I do expect Minnesota to be the next victim of that experience. It's a one-of-a-kind treatment to get in the NBA today that OKC delivers to you. Let's talk about the other side of the ball, though, because you mentioned you think Minnesota's going to give some of it back, and this is a great Minnesota defense as well. How do you expect SGA to fare? Let's start with the top dog for OKC.
I think SGA is going to be fine. Now, maybe we see him have to adjust to some things like in the Denver series, ease into it, but I really like the level that SGA has been at or reached at the last 3-4 games of the Denver series. Like, I just think he's hitting his stride at the right point. Like, he's finding that level, and we already know how consistent he is. So I expect him to carry some of that on into Minnesota, but SGA wasn't disrupted by Minnesota really at all in the regular season. He gave Minnesota 35, 6, and 6 on 64% true shooting. That's in 4 games. And if I'm Minnesota, I would really be committed to selling out on SGA, Carson. I'm just not super confident that J-Dub is ready offensively. And I would test him in the supporting cast as much as possible. So that's kind of my game plan if I'm Minnesota's defense, is not exactly how Dallas defended SGA. I don't want to go to that dramatic of an extent. I would try to defend him one-on-one as much as possible. I'm never a guy that traditionally likes to send doubles aggressively as much, because I think SGA is a good enough playmaker to where if you're giving him easy reads, he's going to kill you. So I'm trying to defend him one-on-one as much as possible with a Jaden McDaniels, with an Anthony Edwards as best as I can. But I am going to be ready to send those doubles and test J-Dub in these shooters, because if Lou Dort's on the floor, I'm comfortable leaving him and gambling and playing over on SGA. If J-Dub is at the level that he was at in the half court, because he's a great transition scorer, but if he's at the level he was in the half court, I'm okay leaving him alone and letting him work to his mid-range jumpers. He only gave you 18 points a night, but it was on under 48% true shooting against Denver. So that's my theory, Carson, is I'm going to test these shooters as much as possible. I'm going to test J-Dub as much as possible until they're making me pay, if SGA is killing me. Because I think he is going to get his, man. I don't think there's a good answer for SGA. I really think he's the best player left in the playoff field, and he's really hard to stop. I mean, he can just score from anywhere inside the arc, and people get tired, I feel like, of us praising SGA for how special he is and how young he is, but that's just a reality. He's the best player, I think, in the playoff field. He's a top 2 player in basketball. I still do reserve that for SGA and Jokic. Shout out Giannis. I know some people would throw him in there, but I just have an immense amount of respect for him, the level that he reached in this Denver series, the level that he's at right now, and he's the best scorer in the game today, and I'm banking on him doing that against Minnesota.
He is the best scorer in the game today, and I said that earlier in the year. I think he had surpassed Jokic as a scorer. I do feel more confident in that after this last series, because I did think you saw with Jokic the ability to limit his scoring volume more, like we were talking about with Caruso, just making it so hard to even get him the ball. SGA is always going to have the ball in his hands when he wants it, and he's going to be able to create phenomenal, efficient offense for you, and he fried Minnesota this regular season, man. Gave him 35 points per game on 64% true shooting. This is a really good defense. They have great point of attack defense with Jaden McDaniels, with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They have elite rim protection, obviously, with Rudy Gobert. I just think if SGA plays how he played in those last 3 games against Denver, truly defenses are helpless. Like, that was just such a high level from him that a defense really can't make that player uncomfortable. He really found a special groove as a shot maker, getting to his spots from the mid-range, and he was just automatic. He even started to find the pull-up and step-back 3, and as a decision maker, importantly, he was getting into the teeth of the defense, and he was making the right reads repeatedly. I would expect him to continue to play at that level, because I do think a lot of teams are fundamentally going to have the same approach with SGA, and it's load up on him, make him beat us as a decision maker, mix in some zone to test his playmaking and test OKC's shooting, which I do think is a good strategy, even though OKC got more comfortable against the zone as that Denver series went along, and a big part of that was SGA. Overall in the playoffs, they generate 0.98 points per possession versus man and 0.91 points per possession versus zone. So on average, the zone defense has been more effective against OKC, but when SGA is getting to all the right spots and he's dialed in as a shot maker, and you know that he's always going to have an extremely high scoring floor because of his ability to get to the rim and get to the line and be so great finishing in the paint, and then he's making all the right reads, like, at the end of the day, one of the best guards ever is playing like it right now. And so I do expect him to be easily, honestly, the most consistent and the best offensive player in this series. I think that he is clearly the best player on either team. And I also think that although both of these guys are facing difficult matchups, the level of hell that is awaiting Ant with this OKC defense is on another level than what SGA is going to be facing. So I do expect a very, very good series out of him.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a ton that you can do with SGA. He's just...
And he would have to fall back into the bad habits that were plaguing him early
I
against
completely
Denver,
agree.
and I can't really see that happening because it felt like once he locked in and realized, okay, I'm forcing the issue some, and he was panicking a little bit under pressure. Like, he was just so comfortable in those last 3 games, and I don't really see why that wouldn't carry over into this series, or even if he does start this series slow, why he wouldn't also be able to adjust and snap back into form. It was just such an encouraging end of the Denver series. Makes me very confident in his level going into this one.
Yeah, I mean, putting up pull-up threes, like he really got away from that, and he was hitting some in Game 7. But specifically, I do trust these shooters a little bit more, and I don't think it's going to be easy because both of these teams, I mentioned that earlier, that Oklahoma City opponents had the worst three-point percentage in the NBA against them. Minnesota was top 5 in that category too. They're great at defending the perimeter, and I think some of these games could really just come down to which supporting cast outshoots the other, because there's streaky shooters on both sides, but there's great shooters on both sides, and I can definitely see that determining individual games. For the Thunder, that's less of a concern. I trust their shooting. It's more to me about J-Dub getting going. I think J-Dub might be the X factor for me for Oklahoma City, just because I really trust SGA. I really trust this defense. I really trust Oklahoma City's shooting in their ability to generate high-quality three-point opportunities. So the last key to me is just J-Dub getting going a decent amount. I don't think J-Dub has to be great every game. He wasn't against Denver. I just think you need a few big games from J-Dub, like you got in the Denver series. I thought you got 2 really good ones. And you need him to just be at a higher baseline, Can you give me 21 to 22 a night on 54% true shooting? Can we get, somewhere in the 50s at that ballpark? If we reach those benchmarks, I'm really confident in Oklahoma City. But I also do think Minnesota can muck it up a little bit, Carson. We're talking about the physicality battle. If I'm Minnesota, I'm consistently staying aggressive. I am going to continue to work downhill against this Oklahoma City team. I want them potentially in foul trouble. We're just working at the rim, working to get downhill, staying aggressive, seeing if we can get these guys in foul trouble early. And I think it's really important that Minnesota stays close to the rim. And the reason I say that is I think that they could win the rebounding battle in a few of these games with Gobert, with Randall, with their collective. But if they're settling for a lot of three-point opportunities and they're not hitting, I really do think that favors Oklahoma City with those long transition opportunities. You're going to feed that fast break offense, and I think that's just going to allow Oklahoma City to get out on the break more. Also, I would try to protect the basketball as best you can and work deep into the shot clock. Again, I think an up-tempo game, in my opinion, the only reason I say that is because I just would want to limit turnovers.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to feed the beast, because if you're letting long rebounds happen, if you're turning the ball over at a high rate, letting Oklahoma City get out in the fast break, I just think that really favors them, and you're feeding them. I thought we saw a lot of that in Game 7 against Denver, and you just can't do that against Oklahoma City.
You definitely cannot, and yet you will. That's just the reality. Like, they turn teams over at a rate that we haven't seen in decades. They also protect the ball incredibly well. They are the best team in basketball at turning teams over, and they are the best team in basketball at not turning it over. And by the way, SGA is a huge component of that, regardless of the level of pressure and physicality that he's facing defensively. And I think that Minnesota can dial that up, and the physicality is a key part of it, because if there's any way to make SGA uncomfortable, I do think it's with that hyper-physical perimeter defense. But he's never going to turn the ball over. Like, he averaged 2 turnovers a game against Denver. That's what he did this season. He's the lowest turnover player to score with the volume that he does we've seen in the history of this league. With Ant, with Randall, I do think there's a lot more potential for them to be forced into those giveaways, and that's where OKC pulls apart. That's where they separate. It's that defense into offense. We've seen it way too many times. I do think that factor and SGA's consistency gives OKC an offensive floor that I feel pretty good about in this series, but there are a couple of real question marks. And they're the same as always. It's J-Dub and it's the outside shooting. Like, I know what I'm getting from the defense. I know that Shai is going to play like a top 3 guy on the planet. What am I getting out of J-Dub? That's a question. What I would like to see from him is him playing downhill but under control, where you're not getting those sort of reckless drives and he can struggle playing through contact, and sometimes he's forcing up these out-of-control finishes. I want him when he has an advantage, if it's playing off the catch, if it's in a matchup that he likes, getting to the basket. I want him to be aggressive in transition for sure. I think that's always where he's at his best as a scorer. And the biggest swing factor for him is just his jump shot, because there have been games where I don't like the process from him offensively, and I do feel like he's out of control, and he's forcing shots that I don't like. But the biggest problem last series was he shot 25% from deep. This is a guy who shot 42% from deep post All-Star break, who is a very good jump shooter, but can be an inconsistent one. So I do trust his mid-range. I understand it's not always the most efficient, but he's generally pretty damn good from the mid-range. The three really has to be falling, and when it is, he's a very good three-level scorer. So I expect this series to be better for him than the Denver series was, because games 4 through 6 of that series were so rough offensively, but I do still think there will be some inconsistency. I don't think you know what you're getting from J-Dub night after night. I just think last series was an exceptional level of struggle from him, and he'll be better in this one, and he'll be more consistent in this one. The shooting, I also do have questions about. Like, OKC was first in three-point percentage after January 1st, and so I came into the playoffs feeling pretty good about their overall shooting. But they're 14th in three-point percentage in the playoffs. They're only shooting 32%, and when they have lost games, a lot of it has had to do with an inability to capitalize on good looks from beyond the arc. So if they can really open things up and shoot the three ball at their regular season level, they're going to be unstoppable. They will roll their way to a title. But if there's one thing that's going to hold them back, it would be those struggles from deep, because that's how you hang around with them. When Shai's playing at a special level and the defense is special and the supporting cast is knocking down all their threes, well, then they're just going to run away and blow you out. But that is the question mark. That is the swing factor with this team. And I don't like how Chet is shooting right now. I thought that he looked uncomfortable from beyond the arc against Denver. I thought he did a lot of other great stuff, but the outside shot, I didn't like. I don't like how Lu Dort is shooting. We're looking at 2 series deep. This guy's making 25% of his threes. And so that is the one concern I would have about this offense. That and J-Dub. And I do think that we'll see Minnesota try to put Rudy on, say, a Lu Dort. Like, with the starting 5, Rudy will be on Hartenstein. But when they go with some of those groups where it's only one big, like especially if it's Chet and all wings and guards around him, then I think that they will absolutely put Rudy on whoever they think the weakest shooter on the floor is, so he can be in that roamer role. And if you're funneling a lot of shots to Lu Dort from 3, I don't like that if I'm OKC. And that's where I think, as we talked about last series, they have to be very, very willing to use their depth. I'm talking big minutes with Case and Wallace out there, big minutes with Alex Caruso. I like both of those guys more than Dort. But with Caruso, it's not even a question. I just think he's a much better all-around basketball player.
To Wiggins if Dort can't hit a shot.
I agree. I mean, Wiggins offensively is a very good option. But with Case and with Caruso, you still get that special elite defensive impact, and you get more versatile offense, not just shooting that is more consistent right now, but better decision-making, more passing.
Too from Kason. Dude, Kason was playmaking his ass off that last game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's just an absolute baller. But Caruso's the guy I'm really looking at, and I'm saying, okay, in the Randall matchup, in the Ant matchup, like, he can make both of those guys so uncomfortable, and I know that he's going to make all the winning plays. I know that he is going to rise to the moment in a special way. I know that if we do see a zone, he's going to be cutting to the right spots. He's going to be making the right reads, and he's going to knock down his shots from the outside. Just the more versatile, complete player who I want to see. I do think the depth for both of these teams is awesome. Like, I would give OKC an edge there because they just go a little deeper than Minnesota. But without a doubt, these are 2 of the 5 deepest teams in basketball. And I do think that it's going to be really fun to see what different groups we see close different games to this series, because it's not going to be the starting 5 closing every night. I think there will be a number of nights where we see Caruso closing instead of Hartenstein, or maybe we see Naz Reid closing for Minnesota, or we see Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante DiVincenzo. Like, there's just so many options.
Late for Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah. Naz, very, very impressive offensive talent. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup for him. I do think that he might also struggle to take advantage of some of the size advantages that he would have on paper, because the OKC defense is that feisty, and he's normally not like a post-up player. He does so much of his work from the perimeter. That's really difficult against this team. Like, he's great as a ball handler for his size. It's different when it's
I
Alex
mean,
Caruso
I'm
or it's
worried
Casey
about
Wallace
all
getting
of.
up in your dribble.
That's what I'm really. I think that's probably my biggest concern with the Minnesota offense is just the inconsistency of the handle of all these guys and the decision making. Because I have my question marks, about Ant, Julius, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid, all against. And it's not a slight at any of them, man, because they're great in most matchups. It is quite literally just the elite ability of this OKC perimeter defense to do that to teams. So I don't want this to come off as a slight to Minnesota. I also think this is going to be a hyper competitive series. I think this is going to be really, really close.
I think it's going to be really close as well. I think it's going to be very interesting. I am going to take OKC in 6. With the level that Shai is playing at, with how special their defense is, and just having enough faith in J-Dub in the shooting, that's really the swing factor. If Minnesota were to win this series, which I think they can, it's going to be because OKC doesn't shoot well enough from beyond the arc, and it's going to be because their stars exceed my expectations. Ant and Randall are really good in these really difficult offensive circumstances, but I just trust OKC's ability to make them uncomfortable. And again, there are certain things with them that you can just bank on night after night, like winning the transition battle as convincingly as they do, winning the turnover battle as convincingly as they do, having such an elite defensive floor and having the best offensive player on the floor in the series. That just gives me a lot of faith in them, man. You saw it in the Denver series, which is a different matchup, but I think Denver and Minnesota are on very similar levels as teams. OKC could let Denver hang around in a game, and then Denver could steal a couple. But when OKC won, they could really, really open things up, and they beat Denver by 30 twice in that series. That's the potential that they have. And I also think that this is a different matchup in the sense that, in those clutch games against Denver, well, Denver is very, very proven. They're very tried and true as a clutch offense. I don't feel that way about Minnesota. I don't trust their process nearly as much. And I think, if anything, I trust OKC's clutch offense more. So Minnesota's a great team. They're playing great basketball. They're a great defense. They're a very good offense. Their depth is excellent. I just trust OKC more, and I do think that they're the more talented team overall.
I'm going to take the Thunder in 7. Basically, it comes down to what I said at the start. I just think that Oklahoma City can reliably make Minnesota a little bit more uncomfortable on that end. And I want to be clear about something. I think Minnesota could win convincingly in a game where they out-physical OKC on the glass and they outwork them, and Oklahoma City has an off shooting night. I really see Ant having a couple of big games in this series, even though this is a tough matchup for him. I think the most difficult in the league. I do respect Ant and how special he is, and I think he's going to have a few massive games, and Minnesota comes away with, 2 or 3. But ultimately, I trust the Thunder in their defense. I trust SGA more than anybody else remaining in the playoffs, and I just can't imagine J-Dub looks worse than he did in that Denver series, man. I get it's a little bit of a tougher series, but he was horrible. I mean, it was just uncharacteristic stuff, smoking layups. I think J-Dub's going to have a little bit of a bounce-back series. So super competitive, but I think OKC gets it done on their home floor in 7.
I think that last series was a very significant mental test for OKC, and they passed it. I really thought that we did see them grow into the playoff moment as that series went along, and they just have so many different options, man. They have so many guys who are really good basketball players where even if one of them is off, you turn to another one, especially Alex Caruso. He's just going to step up and win you some big-ass games. So, I agree. I am taking OKC in 6. Let's talk about the matchup out east, Logan. We've got a classic throwback rivalry series, Knicks-Pacers. Let's start with how this Indiana offense is going to face the Knicks defense. How do you expect them to perform, and how do you expect New York to try to handle an offense that has been very, very effective all year and especially in these playoffs?
I like some of the Knicks personnel, specifically the wings, Bridges and Anunoby. But I'm really worried about the double big look and Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson in general in this series. They seem like the most glaring weak points along with Jalen Brunson against this Indiana offense. But specifically, I worry about those guys against Indiana's pace of play and depth, the bigs. I worry about Cat and Robinson in transition, just getting up the floor in time. We know this Pacers team. They're aptly named. They push the pace better than anybody else in the league off of buckets, off of turnovers, off of rebounds. They are flying down to the other end, and they're getting easy buckets. And they've got a guy that capitalizes on teams not getting back in transition better than anybody else, and that's Tyrese Haliburton. And this team collectively is just really good at doing that. And so I worry about the double bigs in transition. I also worry about them in the half court defending in space. Switches on Tyrese Haliburton. I think Haliburton could have a big game. A big series. I think against a Nembhard. Like, they're just not good perimeter defenders. And so I worry about them, especially when that's what Indiana does in the half court. Everybody on this team can shoot. Everybody on this team can put the ball on the floor. Everybody can make good decisions, and everybody can protect the basketball. And that's really, really problematic when they're going to spread this Knicks defense out and make all these guys defend in space. I also worry about their depth. The Knicks, and if they're going to get worn down late in this series, they only really run 7 deep with Deuce McBride and Mitchell Robinson off the bench. And so I'm concerned that as this series goes along with how Indiana gets out and runs, that they could just be tired and worn down as this series goes on. And that's just addressing really the big lineups. That's not even me addressing Jalen Brunson as a defender, where I think that anybody could really go at him one-on-one. If it's the guards, if it's Haliburton and Nembhard. And let me be clear, Brunson has been trying these playoffs. I think he gives you effort. I think he tries his hardest, but I just think he has physical limitations that are going to be really hard to overcome against some of these matchups. Again, all the guards are bigger than him, but even worse, if you're getting a switch with a Siakam, I think him and Turner are going to abuse that. So I think this Pacers offense is really going to get it going in this series, and there's a lot of defensive weak points that I look at where I worry about the Knicks.
I tend to agree. I think the Pacers offense is going to feast against the Knicks. They've been the number 2 offense in these playoffs, and I underestimated dramatically the Knicks' ability to defend the Celtics last series. They really, really overachieved what I foresaw. I do think that this Pacers offense, though, has a much, much, much better process than Boston's. And I think that where the Knicks were able to lull Boston, as talented as they are, into some of their worst tendencies, where they're really locking in on iso ball, and Cat and Brunson are defending off switches better than they expected, but they're still forcing the issue against these defenders. The Pacers are a very different sort of offense, in that they are going to locate your defensive weak point, and they're not going to force the issue. They're going to create a great shot. They're going to put the defense into rotation. They're going to keep the ball moving, and they're going to find the open man or the advantage wherever that is on the floor. And that all starts with Tyrese Haliburton. He is going to get great shots for Indiana out of pick and roll, especially when Cat is on the floor. I really, really worry about this matchup for Karl-Anthony Towns. I think any big who is questionable guarding in space, really any questionable defensive center, is in for a hellish series when they go up against the Pacers. You can't play drop against Indiana out of pick and roll, obviously. We've known that. If you need evidence of that, look at what happened to Brook Lopez getting played off the floor very swiftly in that series. So that's not an option for Cat. There's just too much shooting from the bigs in the pick and pop game. Hallie's too comfortable against drop as both a scorer and a passer. It's not an option. Maybe they try switching Cat again, which is what they did against Boston, and they got better results doing that than I expected. But I do think that Hallie is a good bit tougher as a cover for Cat in space than the Jays, than Tatum and Brown were, because of his shiftiness. That's what's really going to give any big trouble, but especially a guy like Cat. It's those guards who can really shift gears and then slam on the brakes and step back. Hallie's just been cooking all sorts of bigs like that. He did it to Brook, obviously, but he did it to Jared Allen over and over again in that Cavs series, who is a very legitimate big guarding in space, a hell of a lot better than Cat. He was still food for Hallie, who is generating 1.2 points per isolation in these playoffs. So he has been extremely effective cooking bigs off switches. That worries me for Cat a lot. If that's the approach, maybe they just try Cat playing up at the level, But whenever you put 2 on the ball in any way against Hallie, that's extremely dangerous. He's going to make all the right reads. He has the size and the vision to make passes against pressure out of pick and roll. And Indiana's going to find the open man. So he makes the initial pass, and then they're going to swing and they're going to take advantage of a 4-on-3. Or maybe he just makes a perfect skip pass and he kills you immediately with the first read. I just don't think there's anything resembling a decent answer for the Knicks in terms of what you do with Cat on the defensive end. And then Brunson is the other liability who you look at and expect Indiana to really attack. I do feel better comparatively about Brunson's ability to hold up. Like if they bring Brunson into the action, if they have his man screen for Haliburton, I think you just live with the switch. And I don't feel terrible about Brunson's ability to guard Hallie out in space. So I think you can live with that. The bigger concern would be what you mentioned, like what if they start having Siakam running inverted pick and roll targeting Brunson? Do they put 2 on the ball and then Siakam finds Nembhard who's popping and he's open for 3? If they switch Brunson onto Siakam, I think that's a problematic matchup. Brunson did better than I would have expected against both Tatum and Brown last series, and Brunson does have strength defensively. He's got a low center of gravity, and he does fight. But Siakam is really an expert mismatch attacker. He is so comfortable bullying guards out of the post, and I think he's pretty damn effective doing so. So I don't think that Brunson's as glaring a problem in this matchup as Cat, but I do still think he's a defensive weak point that Indiana can attack. And of course, I'm talking about what do they do with these guys out of pick and roll defensively. Indiana is also just going to hunt those transition cross matches and try to get Cat guarding a guard out in space in the full court. Try and get Siakam quickly sealing Brunson down court, because that's what they do better than anybody else. They run and they don't play against set defenses, and so you just have to scramble, and you may end up in a matchup that you as the defense really don't like. Indiana's going to generate more of those chances than anybody else. So I just really don't see New York slowing down Indiana's offense at all. Indiana is leading the playoffs in assists per game by far. They're averaging 30 assists per game. They're number 1 in field goal percentage. They're number 1 in three-point percentage. They're a 94th percentile transition offense. They're an 88th percentile half-court offense. And again, New York overachieved my expectations against Boston, but it's a very different matchup. That is a team that is not nearly as smart offensively as Indiana. They're very talented, but you are not going to be able to lull the smartest collective offense in basketball, which I do think Indiana is, into settling for subpar shots. They're going to get great looks. They're going to find your weak points over and over again. And I just think offense is going to come easier for them in this series than it is for New York.
I do too. I mean, I think the recipe for New York winning is winning in the physicality departments and having the viability of those double big lineups. Like, I think the requisite is the prerequisite for them winning is, like, I think Cat and Robinson have to be effective. To me, Cat is the X factor in this series, offensively and defensively for the Knicks. Everything that we mentioned about just defending in space and being able to be on the floor, also not fouling as well too. You just need Cat out there on the floor. But he dominated offensively, and that's where I could see Cat having a big impact. In the regular season, he gave Indiana 30, 12, and 2 on 70% true shooting. To me, Cat's going to be the guy that's going to break this open. He would convincingly outplay Pascal Siakam in this series. Say Brunson and Haliburton play to a wash in terms of overall impact, points, and playmaking. Cat could be the guy that could convincingly outplay Siakam, but also could provide a role defensively, you know, as an impactful post defender on those guys, as a really impactful rebounder. But Cat's got to be out there first and foremost, and he just can't get attacked defensively because, again, that's just where I worry about the Knicks. But I could see their offense outperforming Indiana in a few games just with the ceiling that some of these guys have, the level that I know Bridges can reach, the level that I know Cat can reach. Are they going to do it consistently enough to beat Indiana? That's the real question. Also, I think we're going to have to see them win a couple of games like they did against Boston, Carson, where they're lingering around all game. They just got to hang through 3 quarters, and then right in the 4th, Brunson and Cat turn it up a notch and steal it in the clutch. But to me, it's easier said than done, and I really do see the Knicks getting worn down, man. I think it's going to be hard on their bodies and hard on this rotation.
For sure.
Keeping up with Indiana, and I just think their guys are going to be fresher. And they're going to be able to fly up and down the court. And I think that's a really tall task to ask on this Knicks team that's only 7 deep, that has 2 bigs that I think can get exploited.
Yeah.
It's just a lot to ask, I think, for New York, man.
It definitely is. And the formula that you mentioned for New York in games 1 and 2 versus Boston, first of all, that required some crazy meltdowns from Boston.
True.
Truly disastrous basketball. I just think that Indiana is so much more consistent offensively. Some of the looks from 3 that you didn't like from Boston that they were settling for, Indiana's not going to take those looks. Truly, I think that they are the best offense in basketball at consistently creating a great shot quality. And that is a collective effort. And for the Knicks, they are a very good offense, but it does come a little harder for them. I do think that they are more dependent on a couple guys specifically. I do think that they play a couple more questionable offensive players than the Pacers do, where you feel pretty good about everybody in their role offensively. I do think that Jalen Brunson will get his in this series. I think that his floor as a scorer is so high. That's why we've seen it. He's basically a 30-point-per-game scorer across 3 postseasons with the Knicks. His ability to chisel his way into the paint, his shot making in the intermediate area, his ability to get to the line consistently, and then he has the pull-up three-point shooting. He just has such a complete scoring arsenal, and he's so difficult to deal with on an island. He's so difficult to deal with out of pick and roll. But I do think in this series, although he's going to get his in terms of volume for sure, he's going to have to work. And that's been the theme. Against Detroit with Asar as a really tough matchup. With Dennis Schroeder, he had to work. Last series with Drew Holiday and Derek White and Jaylen Brown, all those guys made him work. So Brunson's efficiency, he's 56% true shooting. It's not bad when you consider he's a small guard carrying the load that he is in these playoffs. He's been very impressive overall, but that's still not super efficient offense. And those points, again, they take him working. It's going to be not a struggle, but a battle. It's not going to come easy to him. And I do think that Indiana's perimeter defense is quite good. I think that Aaron Nesmith should be his primary matchup. We saw in the playoffs last year, he is just a much better option on Brunson than Nembhard, in my opinion, because even though Nembhard is feisty and he applies a ton of pressure, it just comes down to the strength and size advantage that Nesmith has. That's where I really like him, because Brunson is so physical. I mean, he's one of the most physical and one of the strongest guards in basketball. And in the playoffs, he's able to use that strength to create separation, to get a bump. And Nesmith is just much better equipped to counter that. And I generally just like guys who are a little bigger and who have an advantage in that way in terms of size dealing with Brunson. But he's going to deal with both of them a lot. I think that he's going to be guarded by both of them a good bit. I think that the Pacers will probably mix up the looks some. And then he's also going to get some TJ McConnell. He's going to get a lot of dudes who are pressuring full court, who are good perimeter defenders, who are crazy well-conditioned. And he's crazy well-conditioned too, but they're just not going to let up. They're not going to relent. It's not an easy perimeter defense to go up against. And then Miles Turner has also really been protecting that rim at a high level. So I would say this is an easier matchup for Brunson than the last 2 series, because those were 2 teams that were very well equipped to defend him. But this is still a team that is well equipped to defend him, and it's a defense that I think has been very underrated overall, and that's a big part of their story in these playoffs. Yes, their offense is what makes them special, but defending at a very, very solid, above average level has been a big part of the getting them here as well. For Cat, I particularly look at his shooting as being crucial in this matchup, because I think we're going to see Miles Turner matched up with Cat a lot. We've seen other teams try the strategy of putting their center on Josh Hart because they're much more comfortable roaming off of him, because obviously Cat is such a special shooter, and I think that that's a good strategy when you have the personnel for it. I just don't think that Indiana has the size to do that, because then you scale that down. You're putting Siakam now on Cat. I like that matchup a good bit more for Cat in terms of his ability to play bully ball, but even more problematic, you're like, okay, now who are we putting on OG Anunoby? I just think it's going to be Turner on Cat in this matchup, and I don't love Cat trying to go at Turner off of post-ups and isolations. I think that Miles Turner can hold his own decently well there. I generally don't love Cat just going against another 7-footer in those spots. I like him more when he has an advantage. But where Cat really can do damage is pulling Turner out into space, limiting his impact as a rim protector. That's where I want to see the 3-point volume go up from Cat, because so much of these playoffs for him have been about attacking mismatches. If it's, okay, you're putting Tobias Harris on me, can I punish you for doing that? If it's, okay, Drew Holiday's on me, can I punish you for doing that? This is a different matchup. This is where I think it does become more about his three-point shot, which is his most special trait offensively. I want to see more than 5 3 attempts per game from Cat. I think that's really where he has potential to be at his best in this series.
Yeah, I think spacing the floor and dragging Turner out, I think is just good because that's where he's least impactful. He's away from the rim, too. That should maybe open up some cuts on the back end if he's doing that. But also, I think it is matchup dependent. Like, if he's got Siakam on him, you were talking about Tobias, I want him going over a guy like Siakam on the post. I want him trying to get to those layups because that's what's frustrating about Towns is it's like, man, when he does go back to the basket and he gets close to the rim, he's really effective. And not only is he effective when he's going up against these smaller defenders, he's also really good at getting extra opportunities with ones because he's routinely getting fouled by the smaller defenders there. That's the biggest key to me. And he was great against the Pacers in the regular season, but the consistency, because last series I was frustrated, man. I have had a love-hate relationship with Karl Anthony Towns for as long as I can remember. I really didn't like Cat for the longest time.
Used to be a lot more hate, sadly.
Way more. I've come around on Cat a lot more. To me, it has less to do with, I don't really care as much about the personality things. To me, it's the consistency of his play is really frustrating. I need to have less of these high foul games where you're in foul trouble early. I need to have less of these 10-point performances where I don't feel your impact for 3/4 of the game. I need consistent end-to-end impact from Karl Anthony Towns. That's the biggest key to the Knicks for me in this series. It needs to be loud. I need 25 points efficiently, man. Like I need to feel Cat out there every single game, or I don't think the Knicks are going to win this series.
I think both Brunson and Cat have to be great because while I think that Indiana has the better collective offense, I think that they are the better team in terms of identifying advantages, moving the ball, trusting everybody to be able to finish plays efficiently. What New York has is a really great offensive duo, and they have two guys who have the ability to take over individually and give you 60-something combined points in a game. I think that they need a good bit of that if they do want to win this series, and I do agree that that does fall on Cat. And Cat's been really good out of the post in these playoffs. I always talk about over the years how much I prefer it when you get a Cat back to the basket post-up possession compared to a Cat face-up isolation or any Cat isolation that starts out from the perimeter. But once again, man, in these playoffs, he's averaging 1.06 points per post-up. That's an 89th percentile number. He's averaging 0.84 points per isolation. That's a 33rd percentile number.
I mean, he struggles gathering and like going through the lane to the basket, but when he simplifies it and just spins off the guy and puts the shot up, he makes it
just gets to his hook shot.
Easy. It's effortless.
Just 3 dribble back down, get to the hook shot. He's so good at that. And we'll see how much of that he gets to do in this series. But I do think it's trickier against Turner. I'm not saying he can't go at him in that matchup, but I don't want him forcing the issue in that matchup. I do think overall, as I've said, offense isn't going to come as easy to the Knicks. I do think that because they play at such a slower pace, they don't get nearly the same transition opportunities that Indiana does, which are so efficient. They are more dependent on the tough one-on-one shot making from their stars. I do worry this could be a tricky series for like a Mikal Bridges. He's always going to be very dependent on just what level is he at as a jump shooter. And so off the catch, he's going to have his opportunities and maybe he shoots the ball really well. But he is going to be dealing with, as his primary matchup, whoever of Nembhard or Nesmith isn't on Brunson. And those are two really good perimeter defenders who can pressure the ball, who I do think can disturb his handle a little bit and who can force him to settle for a tougher shot diet. So I think he's probably going to have a pretty erratic series. I did want to ask you about the double big look for the Knicks. I know that you've already touched on that, and you've touched on the concerns and the pros that you see for them by going to it. How much do you think they go to it? Is it like a trial thing where let's see 10 minutes in game one, how does it go, and we just proceed from there?
Yeah, I think it is a trial thing. And maybe you just end up staggering. If it doesn't work, maybe you just end up staggering Cat and Robinson's minutes to where like one of them is always on the floor and they just overlap briefly, just because I don't like their front court depth a ton when you go beyond that. But I think you try it, because while I think it has its drawbacks, it also has things that I think, really work in New York's favor. Primarily the rebounding
Yes.
aspect of the double big lineup. It could be the biggest advantage that they have in this series, because I thought the games that Boston did win and dominate, they did an excellent job at creating extra opportunities and beating Indiana on the glass. And that is where I see a Knicks advantage. Like, they're just bigger and stronger and more physical than Indiana. And they've got more guys that I like as rebounders. Like, Josh Hart is going to have a significant impact on the glass. And in those lineups with Cat and Robinson, if they are defending in space, if they are getting up down on the floor in transition, I think they could really win the possession battle in a big way. And that is a huge component, I think, to the Knicks winning this series.
I totally agree. I think that the couple areas in which the Knicks would have to be great to win this series, I mentioned the two stars being consistently awesome in Brunson and Cat. The other one is just their ability to generate extra possessions. I mean, that is where the double big look has been so effective. They are grabbing 38% of available offensive rebounds in these playoffs when they have Towns and Robinson out there together. They're also grabbing 80% of defensive rebounds. So they're just dominating the glass on both sides of the ball, unsurprisingly, because Mitchell Robinson is a top 2 offensive rebounder in basketball. And also defensively, those looks have been really good. Most of that was in the Boston series. I do worry a little more about having 2 slower-footed bigs out there. Mitch can guard in space certainly better than Cat can, but really it's transition defense against a team that plays so fast. When you have 2 true centers on the floor, that's a concern. And also just like some of the conditioning of it, wearing them down, 2 centers out there having to play at such a breakneck pace. That is a concern, but you have to at least try it because Mitch has been so good in his minutes. The double big look has been so effective. And Indiana's not a good rebounding team. There's not. Miles Turner's a bad rebounding 5. So if you can be generating 10 extra possessions per game compared to what Indiana is getting, that's a way that you can cancel out to some extent the advantage that they have where, yeah, they're getting more easy points in transition, but we're just getting way more second chances. And I do think that the Knicks will get more second chances for sure. Maybe the key difference in this series, though, doesn't necessarily come down to either side of the ball specifically. It just comes down to the combined impact of depth and pace in Indiana's favor. This is a New York team that only wants to play 7 guys. This is a New York team that is going to play their starters 40-plus minutes consistently, and it's really impressive that they do that. Those guys all compete, and obviously they've gotten to the conference finals with that formula, even though if you look at everybody else, who's advanced? It's Minnesota with their elite depth. It's OKC with their elite depth. It's Indiana with their elite depth. The Knicks have been able to overcome not having that deep bench. But nobody is better built to exploit a depth advantage than the Pacers are, because they are going to run and run you. They are going to pick up full court defensively. They are going to play crazy fast offensively. They are going to go 10 deep. The Knicks want to play slow. They're only going to play their 7 guys. But I think Indiana is going to be able to dictate the pace for the most part in this series. And I think that that advantage that they have there builds over a game, and it builds over a series where they just wear you down. And particularly the Knicks, I do think they're going to be able to wear down. They just have Energizer bunnies, man. And on both sides of the ball, they really set that tone where they're trying to speed you up and they're going fast offensively. And I don't think they'll necessarily be able to speed Brunson up. And I think his endurance as a scorer is one of his most impressive traits. But it's just going to be a grind. It's going to be a grind, and it's going to be a grind for all of the Knicks. And I think it's just going to be a little bit more breezy and fun for the Pacers, who are coming in for their shifts, and they're moving the ball, and they're finding the defensive weak points, and they're just flying around the court, and they're playing so fast, and they're bringing so much energy. So I am going to take Pacers in 6. I think that both of these defenses are solid, and I don't think either one can necessarily give the other offense too much trouble, but I think Indiana's defense is more complete, and I don't think that they have the sort of weak points that the Knicks do, especially with like Hallie defending as capably as he has been in these playoffs and this season overall. And I think the Pacers offense is more dynamic. So I think what the Knicks did last series was very impressive, but again, it required some malfunctioning on Boston's part and some real clutch heroics. I think that that's just a much more difficult formula to replicate against an Indiana team that I do think is so consistent.
Yeah, that ultimately is the difference to me too, as the depth advantage. I think that the Knicks are going to get worn down, and It's a lot. It's a lot on the plate of Robinson and Towns, and
Yeah.
I just trust Indiana more. I think they're going to get so many easy points on the fast break and in transition, and I think that's going to be so hard for the Knicks to overcome. It's just going to stack, and it's going to be so easy for them. Essentially, I think the Knicks are going to have to work harder for their buckets, and that's going to accumulate, as you said, over the series, and that's why the Pacers are going to win to me. So I'm going to take the Pacers in 6. I say they get it done on their home floor.
It's so interesting, man, because it's always been like an NBA doctrine that you can't necessarily translate the level of success that you have in the full court to the playoffs because the game is going to slow down. You're not going to have as many transition opportunities. And I do think that there's truth to that. I actually do still very adamantly believe that bad half-court offenses that only rely on their transition offense can't win in the playoffs. I think that there are a number of examples of that in recent years. I always point to the Grizzlies of 2022 and 2023 with Ja. Houston this year, they weren't so reliant on transition as much as they were their offensive rebounding, but that was a bad half-court offense. Like, you have to be a good half-court offense to win. But the idea that being a great transition offense is not still a huge advantage, that's just not true. Like, if you look at the two teams that are just going to consistently get the most easy points baked into every game, it's the two teams that get out and transition the most. That's the Thunder, who are averaging 28 transition points per game in these playoffs. That's the most of anybody. And then the Pacers are averaging 23 transition points. That's the second most. That does give you a floor. And in today's game, man, like, you can absolutely still play at a fast pace in the playoffs, and you can be very successful doing so. And you can set the tone with your defense to get transition opportunities offensively. Transition offense is always very valuable. You just need more than that as well. And I think that's something that sometimes people can kind of misconstrue and misunderstand. I also think some people still misunderstand Tyrese Haliburton, man. And I see people saying like, oh, the Pacers can't win this series. The Pacers can't get to the finals. The Pacers can't win it all. They don't have a true number one. And I just think that's kind of ridiculous, because if you think that Tyrese Haliburton doesn't have number one offensive impact, I just don't know what you're watching. Like, I've talked about it so many times, but he's the best decision maker in basketball. He is the most selfless player in basketball at leveraging his scoring threat to create great shots for teammates. He's the best at pushing pace, and he is a really good scorer, very efficient. He's just not always going to do it with crazy volume, but he dictates so much. Doesn't turn the ball over. Like, he's an offensive genius. He's an offensive maestro. And basketball is a team sport, man, and the Pacers have the best offense. So what does it matter if they have a quote-unquote number one, even though I think that they do in terms of impact in Tyrese Haliburton? But okay, they don't have a 30-point-per-game scorer. What does that matter when they create better offensive results than you over and over again? I just think that that's a very silly criticism that I've seen a lot.
The number's not high enough, Carson.
The number of points per game that Tyrese Haliburton scores?
Yep, that's just not high enough.
I'm sorry to hear that, man. Brunson is going to score more points per game, that's for sure. I do think that Brunson is better than Hallie, but I think it's pretty close, and I definitely think it's a lot closer than a lot of people would have led you to believe before these playoffs. I'm very excited for both of these series, Logan, and I got to say, big picture, I just love that these are our conference finals. This feels like a very appropriate representation of basketball in 2025, where this is going to be the 7th straight year that we have a new champion. This is the age of parity, and you look at these 4 teams, 3 of them are from smaller markets. Minnesota's not a tiny market, but Indiana and Oklahoma City are, and Minnesota is still, again, a smaller market, especially when you think about the teams that have historically contended in the NBA. None of these franchises have won a title since the 1970s. 2 of them have never won at all in Indiana and Minnesota. Oklahoma City, they've never won since they've been in Oklahoma City, obviously. It was with the Sonics in 1979. Knicks haven't won in more than 50 years. So I think it's very fun from that perspective that we're seeing new teams represented at the top of the sport. And all of these teams represent the ascension of this younger generation. Anthony Edwards is 23. He's leading the Timberwolves. Hallie's 25. He's leading the Pacers. SGA is 26. He's leading the Thunder. Obviously, their entire team is very young. Jalen Brunson even is 28. Like, it's just this awesome culmination of the age of parity and the young generation taking over, and it's all wrapped up and it's embodied by these 4 teams, and I think it's just great, man. I'm very, very much looking forward to this conference.
As am I. I just think the sport's in a great place right now.
Sports in a great place. It's the age of parity until the Oklahoma City Thunder win 6 titles in 8 years. That's what's coming.
Oh, the Spurs are coming, man. I don't know. Wemby's gonna come up.
No, the Spurs are coming for sure. I don't actually think the Thunder are going to win 6 titles in 8 years, but I do think they'll win at least 3
I couldn't count it out.
titles.
I mean, I think that the Thunder. I mean, I know you've been saying they're going to be a dynasty for the longest, but I agree with that. I think they're going to get multiple.
Yeah, it's very difficult to replicate dominant team results in today's NBA, but the Thunder are just in a completely different position than everybody else has been since the Warriors started their dynasty to do so. I talk about this a lot, but I was just thinking about it because, like, yeah, it is the age of parity, but then there's one team that has a very clear opportunity to just shatter that age of parity and just keep getting better and keep adding talent, and they have so many assets, and they already won 68 games and are the title favorite at this point. Logan, we'll be back here tomorrow night. I can't wait to talk some basketball. I do think it's insane that the Thunder only get 1 day of rest while the Pacers and Knicks get plenty of days of rest. But hey, that's the NBA, buddy. It's where amazing happens. We will be back here, and we hope you guys join us. Real quick before we go, just so you guys know, NerdSesh is no longer with The Volume. We love The Volume. I still work with The Volume, but we are no longer under the company umbrella. That doesn't really affect anything for you guys, but we are going to try to figure out our own merch setup, so we're going to work on that. So we ask you guys to be patient with us, and then hopefully we can get a whole good situation going there, and we'll see what's next. So what's next for us now, Logan, is a podcast tomorrow, and a podcast the day after that, and a podcast the day after that, and a podcast the day after that. And if I'm not mistaken, Logan, you're going to make the racist catch the fade again? You're going to fight racism with your fists?
I had to fight back against some of your unfounded allegations, man.
Well, the things that you say in private life to me can be shocking. I'm not going to deny that. But at the end of the day, you're a good guy.
Thanks, bro, I guess.
I mean, you want to make racists catch the fade again. That's beautiful.
I'm fighting them all in 2025. Pull up.
You got to fight them on site. Pull up. Logan, address. Logan, please give your home address and social security number.
I give you my bank card.
That also works. Any way for the racists to find you.
I'm obliterating them on sight with my laser vision.
Do you have that? Did you unlock that ability?
Mm-hmm.
How many V-Bucks did that cost you? How many VC was that?
It's a new perk I unlocked.
Damn, you tough as hell.
Thanks, bro.
You are tough as hell. Thank you guys for sitting here and watching or listening to this episode.
We're gonna be back again. We're gonna be back again tomorrow, though, with another Yav Sesh with some conference finals basketball, Carson. And if I'm not mistaken, Naz Reid is gonna play.
Naz Reid is going to play. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to play. Chet Holmgren is going to play. Anthony Edwards is going to play. Oh, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. We do hope that you guys are with us for that. And as always, you can find all of our full episodes on our YouTube channel. You can join us for our post-game live streams, or you can watch them back after the fact. You can listen to all of our full episodes across all audio platforms. And you can follow us across social media, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see clips from the show, graphics from the show, and of course, you can see all of our trivia content there. And you can join our Discord if you want. That is linked at the link tree that is across our social media bios. So with that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was NerdSesh.